Greetings, Tezos Nation. Welcome to another edition of TezTalks Live. I'm Stu from the Tezos Commons. Joining me today are Will and Trinity from Waiting to be Signed, the podcast dedicated to generative art NFTs that frequently covers FX Hash, one of the most lively art marketplaces in the generative art space. On today's stream, we'll be giving away some cold, hard Tez, 25 of them to be exact, to one of our lucky viewers. If you'd like that lucky viewer to be you, keep an ear out for a keyword later on during the stream. And of course, if you have any questions for Trinity and Will that you'd like me to ask, please add them in the chat at any time, and we'll get to as many as we can before we wrap up. Hi, Trinity and Will. How are things on the East Coast?
Chilly, cozy, warm, loving it.
Yeah, it's not too bad today.
Sounds good. To get us started, can you tell us the backstory of how the two of you met and teamed up to start the Waiting to be Signed podcast?
Sure. Was that a gesture to me, Trinity? Yeah.
It was a gesture to you.
Okay. Yeah. So Trinity and I have known each other for a really long time, almost 20 years probably at this point. We met in college through a game called Magic the Gathering. We are big.
I'm familiar.
Yeah. So we're big gamers. We were both kind of playing on the semi-pro scene, and we would just get together to test a lot and play, and then since then we've just kind of always been friends. We've worked together at one job, we've lived together, and we've always been close. We both are New York based. So that's kind of the story of us there. And then as far as getting the podcast started, I guess it all kind of came because of COVID and crypto. And we both kind of independently at first got interest in crypto in general. And then once I kind of got the art collecting bug with early FX Hash days, Trinity jumped in. We spent the first several weeks of it just staying up all night in Discord, watching drops happen and, flipping and just going crazy on it. And eventually we bought into the culture and the community here and saw that it was something bigger than just pure speculation. And we decided that we'd always been looking for a project together. All these years, we always thought, like, let's start a business of some kind. It turns out what we need to do is start a podcast. And we just wanted to document everything that was going on in the space. So
it's pretty funny because, Will has always been a podcast guy. I've been vehemently anti-podcast, but, there really seemed to be this need to document everything that was happening in this space because there was these really large conversations that were just happening on like such a short time scale. And it felt really important to document that for the future. Even I think that was a large part of it at the start was, it's like this minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, conversation about what was happening in this space, and it felt important not to lose that. And so that was really the value.
Really quickly as well, right?
Oh, 100%. And I think that's, been one of the things that's changed about the podcast is just how we document that conversation as like we go through bull markets, bear markets, and everything. It's been a wild ride.
Well,
very cool.
Half a bull market and a current bear market.
And do you still play Magic the Gathering?
Sometimes.
Not often.
We'll get together at a bar, and Will has a pretty great cube actually, and we'll play then. But with kids, and Will is now in New Jersey, it's getting harder to do that, unfortunately.
Tricky,
yeah, the kids is the biggest issue. We used to play pretty consistently once the cube got made, but yeah, now it's been a minute. It's been a few months.
It's fair. So what exactly attracted the two of you to Tezos and FX Hash specifically? Like, why was that the place in the wide blockchain world where you decided to get involved and start making content?
I got into it because of Will.
Yeah,
I did not know what an FX Hash was before Will told me about it.
Yeah, like I said, we were both kind of into crypto, but we were doing like Bitcoin and ETH and rebasing tokens and all of the fad stuff. And when you trade a lot and just kind of like you're in it in that way, you end up with like a lot of remainders of money in your account. And one of the things I also got into was this thing called like helium mining, which I think recently was proved to be like a proper Ponzi, but without getting to the details of it. But I was mining this coin called helium, and the only way to trade it was by going to a really sketchy site that didn't do any like KYC or anything like that. And the fees were really high to go back out into like ETH or something else. So as a side story, we also knew someone who was building in Tezos. So we knew someone who was working on a trading card game in Tezos, and we were kind of like aware of Tezos because of the work that they were doing. And so I was like, I have like $500 of this token. Let me go buy some Tezos and see what this is about. And quickly found Ticket Nuke like 2 weeks before that went down. And then from there, FX Hash emerged and took its place as like the place to start collecting art on Tezos. And so that's what got me hooked, is like seeing all that activity there. So it was really very accidental in a way. I know a lot of people found Tezos because of like the green angle, like proof of stake, at least a lot of artists in the space. But for me, it was just word of mouth and hey, I've got $500.
And I think the thing that, kept me in that space was, the accessibility of it. It felt seamless. It was like a really solid user experience. There weren't gas fees that I've been hearing nightmare stories about, like over on Ethereum. And, the price of collecting was really affordable, where you're able to build a solid collection and join the community, and it wasn't toxic. And so, like, I think from a friendliness perspective, that I think was like hook, line, sinker, let me in. I love this. And as Will said, up all night, many sleepless nights for a couple of months, just consuming.
That's fair. And now, after being attracted in that way, now here you are. For those who might not be familiar, how would you describe the Waiting to Be Signed podcast? Like, what is it that you're doing on it exactly?
So here we're primarily looking to talk about the generative art market. We started out with FX Hash. We've since kind of expanded the borders to talk about generative art generally. And originally it was to talk about primarily the market, because that was like the height of, the bull market. Everything was flipping. Everything was about speculation and just the hype, and the conversation around it. Since then, we've really come down to talk more about the art and the art space. And, we still talk about the money because it's an important part of art on the blockchain, as we, disclaim every single week. And we really want to talk about, what people are coming out with, all the amazing innovation that we're seeing, because generative art, if you look at the space 2 years ago, and you look at the biggest drops that are coming out today, artists have really pushed themselves to do crazy, crazy work. The art's gotten fantastic as people have been doing more practice. And, we absolutely love to see it. Obviously, we'll sometimes be critical of work. We want to celebrate, but also have that balanced side. Yeah, I think you just want to bring more attention to the space, and not just through our episodes about the art, but also through talking to artists too. And other builders such as Valerie from Trillium or Trilitech. Trillium is just a delicious brewery.
Yeah, they're a great
beer on the brain.
And to that end, how many episodes have you produced so far, and what's the response been like from the Tezos community?
We've produced a lot of episodes. It's a little scary. So the show's been running for almost 2 years now. We started it back in January of 2022. So in that time, we've done 90, 91 soon, like canonical weekly episodes, and 50-ish interview episodes on top of that. And those interviews span artists, builders, collectors. Yeah, those are the three main categories. So those are pretty evergreen. If anyone is not familiar with the show and wants to jump in, I would say check out the interviews. As far as the response from the Tezos side, it's been really good. I mean, a lot of the artists that we talk about are primarily Tezos artists and are interested in Tezos in general. And I think they make up the majority of our audience. Like definitely half or more are people who are making art, which was interesting. I kind of figured that they might not like our show at first because we talk about the market and that can be kind of crass to a creative, but they've really embraced it in that sense. And a lot of builders in the space have been very supportive too. Like obviously the FX Hash team, so we've had multiple members on Cypher's come on several times. Emil and Ira from Mprops, who are making like a generative AI platform on Tezos. We've had Valerie from Trilitech. So it's been pretty great.
So you mentioned having Cyphered on the pod. In general, what's the relationship between Waiting to Be Signed and the team at FX Hash like? What does that dynamic look like?
It's pretty good, I'd say. You know, for the first year or so, I think FX Hash they were pretty hands off actually in terms of like promoting not just us, but like anything. You know, they want to be a very neutral platform. So they weren't tweeting about artist releases. They weren't tweeting about episodes we were dropping. But in the last year, we've gotten like way more communication from them. They've been a lot more like supportive in giving us like information ahead of time so we can be sure to include it in the show, you know, suggesting people for us to have on, helping us make connections. Like they were the ones who got us in touch with Valerie at Trilitech for that episode. So it's been, I mean, overall, it's been really, really good. Like I'm super thrilled to just have DM privileges with a lot of folks on the team and be able to ask questions and get insights, you know?
Awesome. So in a more general sense, like we're obviously in the midst of kind of a transitional period for blockchain based art, not just here in the Tezos ecosystem, but like across the space. But unlike many ecosystems in the space, the Tezos art community has actually seemed to get stronger through what some people have called the NFT winter. And I'm wondering, as people who've been paying attention, what do you attribute that robustness to? Is it something that is community driven, or is there more to it than that?
I think it has to do with the art side of things. I think Ethereum and Solana, they've always been really largely based in the PFP scene, which is, you know, primarily based around roadmaps and speculation and, you know, the financialized value that owning a PFP could have. Art is about the intrinsic value of art. You know, it's here to be enjoyed. And, you know, I think that we've seen the overall size of the community maybe become a little bit less over time, but the voices who are here, as you said, the voices are really strong. People are still really excited. And, you know, there's still a lot to rally around. You know, we see like fewer releases, but they're bigger because like they're getting, you know, more complex, like more attention, more visibility. And even if it's something that's happening on another chain, like, you know, a lot of the generative artists, they cut their teeth in the FX Hash world, and we're here to support them no matter where they go. And, you know, I think that just speaks to that really tight-knit community between artists and collectors.
100%. And as people with their fingers on the pulse of the Tezos art scene, from your perspective, at this stage in the game, what's the state of the Tezos art ecosystem as we approach 2024?
Yeah, you know, we can't sugarcoat it too much, right? Like as I think as strong as the space feels and how tight the community is, there have been people who have peeled away, in particular collectors. You know, we've seen a platform, you know, close their doors recently. The fact that pretty much everything is denominated in Tezos terms, when you factor in like the fiat conversion ratio plus just prices going down in general, like in those Tezos denominated terms, like a lot of projects are down quite a bit if you care to do the math. But for those of us who, you know, are here to maybe collect long term and aren't just thinking about selling in the next 6 weeks, 6 days, you know, 6 months, it presents quite an opportunity to like look through and start building a collection and building your own taste and figuring out like, what do you actually like in artwork, not just in like, you know, a speculative token. So there's definitely that side of it. But if you move away from the fact that things are just down generally across the board, there's a lot of cool stuff going on. Like obviously FX Hash has made a ton of improvements to their platform during the bear market. We've had new platforms like MProps, the generative AI platform, open up. That is, you know, and they just recently like really opened up and gave their tools over to artists to make it more of an open platform. We've got 2.0 for FX Hash coming up. So like it's been a growth year for sure. It's been like a just survive kind of year, if I think for a lot of folks. We're excited to go. Yeah, I think we're excited for it to end. Right? I think we're excited for the bull to return and kind of everyone can feel good again.
I think everyone is. We've had a couple of audience cues come through that I want to get to before we move on. Carter would like to know, why the focus on FX hash? Why not the whole Tezos art scene, including places like object.com?
I think that's just a volume thing. FX hash is, we're looking at one feed of information. Generative art is something that we've grown to know a lot about over the last, almost 2 years, 2 years now, pretty much. And so it makes sense for us to be able to cover that in a deep and meaningful, impactful way. When we're looking at covering all of object and its different types of art there, whether it's generative AI, it's like just more digital art itself. I don't think that we'd be able to do it justice.
Yeah.
It's really about going deep and expanding the generative art world, I think.
That's fair. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say FX hash, I think, really benefited early on, and it's like very centralized, like easy to cover everything there, and like the way that they just have that feed that's chronological, that makes it very easy to go like, all right, project number 90 was the last one, and then by the next day it's 150. So we just look at those 60 projects. Whereas with object, it kind of feels all over the place, and so it's really a bandwidth thing, right? It's not a like we don't approve of object or anything. It's just we fell in love with generative art first. It's very easy to grok what released in a given week on FX hash and some of the other platforms, and so that's just we both have jobs and stuff. So
That's true.
Fair enough.
To be fair, we do cover some work on object, more of like generative artists releasing one-of-ones or series there. Thomas Noya, who's a big friend of the show, he released like a gigantic series of generative art as a series of one-of-ones, and we make sure to cover that. Unfortunately, object doesn't really support, at least at this time, creating or releasing an algorithm that then releases that one of X.
Okay.
You kind of have to do it as one-of-ones. So we want to make sure that we're covering that as well.
That's
but
fair.
I think specifically within the code-based art sphere.
Okay. And James would love to know the story behind the name Waiting to be Signed.
Yeah. It's from the early days of FX hash, because their indexer was so slow and there was such high volume. When people would mint projects, people would start flipping them immediately. So you would have all these tokens that were still unsigned. And when the little block went through the Discord sales feed, instead of it showing the image of the art, it would just say waiting to be signed. Sometimes it would take days for that queue to clear up after. There's probably still some tokens actually that are stranded and will never be signed at this point from the earliest beta days. But we kind of thought that's a funny thing that was kind of a meme, I guess, in Discord. And we're like, well, at the time the show was only FX hash. That was all we were paying attention to. And so it seemed like a great name and a nod to that, like those earliest days.
I like it. This is all great stuff so far. I'm excited to learn more. Before we get into the nitty gritty, are you ready for the special 2-guest edition of the world famous TezTalks lightning round?
Oh yeah, we're ready.
That's
100%.
Good. Before we do that, I'd like to announce today's keyword for the 25 Tez we're giving away today. Today's keyword is !Tezos. Enter the keyword !Tezos in the live stream chat, and Nightbot will randomly select today's winner, who will announce it before the end of the stream. Okay, now Trinity and Will, it is lightning round time. Remember, there are no wrong answers, and this is just for fun, so our viewers can get to know you both a little bit better. For each question, each of you can provide an answer, and I'll tell you whose I like better. Are you ready?
Easy. Let's do it.
The best cuisine in the world comes from which country?
Italy, but made by the French or the Japanese.
Okay. I'm going to go India.
I'm going to give this one to Trinity. The best movie ever made is?
I guess I'll go first on this one. I'm a really big fan of The Prestige.
I'm going to say The Matrix.
Again, Trinity.
Wow.
What's the perfect thing to do on a rainy day?
I chill at home or go to a museum.
Sit on your computer and collect art, of course.
Will takes that round. On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to visit FX hash on your day off?
On a day off, it's probably actually lower than on a work day, but still pretty high, like 8.
Same, 8. It used to be
I guess that one's a tie.
I mean, we check it every day, to be honest.
That's fair. And finally, what is the meaning of life?
Just give this one to Trinity already. This one's
Well, let's hear it, Trinity.
oh, she might be lagging a little bit.
Little lag there. I'm giving that round to you. Your mic is working. Thank you. Those were excellent answers. And you're both winners for participating. This concludes the TezTalks lightning round. Let's get back into it. Now that we've talked about the Waiting to Be Signed podcast and its place in the ecosystem, I'd like to zoom out a bit, talk about what it's like to be blockchain technology content creators working to keep audiences engaged in 2023. First off, as content creators who frequently focus on Tezos-based platforms and NFTs, what's your view of the Tezos message and how it's being received currently?
Trinity, you want to do it? Is your audio good?
My audio is good. I think
right.
This is an interesting, tricky question. You know, the people who know Tezos and love Tezos, I think that they get the message and they love it. You know, I think that they understand that Tezos is kind of strictly better on like pure technological terms. I think that it's, you know, trying to hammer that message into the very thick skulls of people who are Bitcoin maxis or ETH maxis, because they don't necessarily want to hear that. And, you know, it's about bag protection for the most part, I think, on that front. I think that's been a really hard thing to kind of tackle when it comes to specifically the Tezos message. I don't know. What do you think, Will?
Yeah, I think definitely it's been hard to sell Tezos to like ETH primary collectors on just purely the technology, because a lot of them, I think, tend to be very market focused people. And so they would say, well, all the liquidity is on ETH. And so if Tezos is better, how come how come it's not there? Right. And so it's always this kind of difficult thing of like trying to bring people over. Like for us, we don't even necessarily pitch the technology as much as we pitch the art, because there's so much early art from artists here who have now gone on to release at places like Art Blocks and Verse and Tonic, and, you know, do sales where they make like $500,000 plus like in a day, you know, off of auctions, but that's all being driven on the ETH side. And so you want to try to get those people to say like, hey, if you really like that artist, like check out these amazing projects they did that got them the notice and the notoriety that you need to like jump over and become curated on some of these Ethereum platforms.
Very cool. And zooming out a little bit further, in a time when consumer sentiment toward NFTs has soured to a certain degree, and where people seem to be taking a more cautious approach to spending money in the space and investing in blockchain-based art, how do we as marketers and content creators counter the sort of the narrative that this is all a bubble that at some point could all just go away?
I mean, I think that with the art scene specifically, it's kind of a null factor because the utility is the art. As long as the blockchain is running and we're using, you know, a token to represent proof of ownership rather than like the actual intrinsic value of the piece, you know, I think that we're okay. It's a method of trading something that people find beautiful, that people, they want to support the artists that they know and that they love. And so I think that from an art perspective, and I think in my mind, Tezos is about the art first and foremost, then it's kind of a moot point.
Okay.
Assuming that Tezos does not the value does not go like a cent.
I think we really get dragged down, in particular in the art space, by all the baggage that comes with NFTs. I would love to see a great rebrand of NFT at some point, hopefully soon, because, you know, we often joke that we're like the most anti-NFT podcast. Like most of it is scams. Like it's not like that brand tarnish is undeserved and unearned. A lot of that stuff costs a lot of people a lot of money when it comes to the PFP stuff. And that's what people think of primarily when they think of NFTs. And so for us, it's more about trying to focus on the fact that, like, yes, this is tokenized. Yes, it uses blockchain technology, but it's doing it in a way that's very different from what the media might have reported to you, or like your friend who lost money, you know, flipping this or that animal, you know, token, like whatever PFP project. Like the roadmap is done. The art's done. If you like it, great. You can keep it forever. it's all about just being cost conscious and disciplined, like as you're collecting. And if you make money long term and that's your goal, great. But if you want to like fill your room with like, you know, prints and collect stuff, then you can just do that, and you can do it in a very chill way.
Mhm. And I think that we've said that 2023, well, you said that it's the year of the physical, and it's about taking that thing that you enjoy in this digital space, bringing it into your physical space. And at that point, like the token doesn't matter so much. Like maybe if you're looking to sell it, but it's about walking by it 25 times a day as you go to the bathroom or whatever. And so I think at that point, it's really fulfilled its purpose. You know, it's something
100%.
that brings you happiness, brings you joy. And I think that, you know, by divorcing the art from necessarily the blockchain, you know, I think we're able to tell like a happier, more holistic story about, you know, the impact on lives, like not in a like capital I or capital L impact on lives, but, you know, just the little joys in life.
Yeah, and we do see a lot of that here in Tezos, where we have, you know, artists coming from all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of parts of the world that are able to get a start, become successful, make a living with their art. Like it's a beautiful thing, right?
Mhm.
Um, in a general sense, what do you think we do well here in the Tezos ecosystem and art space?
A lot. I think there's a lot to like about the Tezos ecosystem for an artist and for an art collector. I think first and foremost, like at the top of the list right now, has to be the fact that all platforms on Tezos currently honor creator royalties. That's a huge issue happening on the Ethereum side due to things like Blur, in particular, causing a race to the bottom. And I don't know if you saw recently, but like OpenSea just got marked down in valuation by like 90% because they're getting absolutely destroyed by just the eradication of fees on that side. So the fact that as an artist, at least for now, you know, I guess if we 100x in market cap, Tezos could have this problem too. But like at least for now, all these platforms are fully honoring creator fees, and I think that's a really great incentive to look at Tezos if you are interested in making NFTs. There's also a lot of innovation. Like just look at FX Hash and all the features that they've added. You know, even during this bear market, redeemables, you know, new variations on auctions, params, which is kind of like similar to QQL for anyone who's like familiar with that, like the ability to customize your outputs. So they're really using the blockchain to its fullest there.
For those who might not be super familiar, can you explain what you mean when you're talking about royalties and why that's important?
So essentially,
Yeah, Trey, do you want to take it?
you know, royalties are essentially at the token level. It's not tied into the token of the contract, but I guess within the marketplace. So let's say you set a royalty of 10%. This means that every single time somebody sells this NFT through a marketplace, the artist will get 10%. And so it's important because it's a way for artists to continue to see value from their work, like especially as it blows up, or else they're only really capturing value at the primary market level. So if you sell a piece of art for $10, you get $10 from it. And if you become really famous later on and somebody sells it for $10 million, well, you just made that person $10 million, but you're not actually seeing any of the, you know, that money. So, you know, it's a way of really valuable on Tezos because, you know, people came for the lower prices. They came for the accessibility because it wasn't up for like the Ethereum market. And so, you know, as Tezos continues to grow and get bigger, I think it's going to be important for artists to be able to capture that value because they help to build this community. They're help building the ecosystem. And so it makes sense for people to do that. It's their art. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's like the main value add that I think the blockchain adds to the art space overall.
Very cool. So those are some of the reasons, some of the things that you think the Tezos ecosystem is doing well. What would you like to see more of in this space?
I've got a couple of things here. I mean, I think first and foremost, like as a collector or just someone who's like Tezos positive, I'd love to see more outreach like on behalf of like Tezos in general. I mean, I think Tezos honestly amongst like art collectors kind of has a bad vibe to it. Like the foundation, I should say, not like the chain. I think people really enjoy the technology, but I think you know, everyone kind of calls Tezos the art chain, even Ethereum collectors calls Tezos the art chain. And it's very hard to see any of that messaging actually coming from like the folks in charge of Tezos directly. Instead, you hear about like big sports team sponsorships and things like that just don't ever seem to materialize into any of the chain activity that you might expect. I mean, so I think that's kind of first and foremost, I think it'd be like recognition, acknowledgement that like this is the community that has found and is using your chain, and starting to see some positive. I mean, I think obviously Trilotech, like talking to Valerie, I think we see that stuff being put into place, but more messaging, like more telling us like, yes, maybe you haven't seen anything in 2023 that's really big, but here's what you should look forward to in 24 and 25 and beyond, and how we're going to embrace art as a blockchain.
It's interesting to hear you say that, because we talk to a lot of artists as well, and they tell us quite a different story, that they feel like there are a lot of resources made available to them, and there is a lot of support from the entities operating within Tezos. But I mean, this kind of spills over into my next point, which is, when we chatted ahead of this stream, we both commented on how, despite the fact that we've all been actively producing Tezos related content for some time, we never communicated, and we're only sort of marginally aware of each other's existence until this stream was set up. So as members of a disparate global community tackling a rich topic like this, how can we bring people like us together to build a more sort of cohesive message for Tezos and its art scene, in your view?
I mean, I think this really comes down to integrated, native events, so to speak. Like as Will was saying, blockchain really kind of blew up during COVID, when everybody was stuck in their homes looking for fun things to do while they were in lockdown. And now that we're in more like that post-COVID world, let's bring this back out into real world spaces. Let's provide some of that support at the art Basels, the freezes of the world, the big art festivals, to really kind of legitimize the the NFT art space overall. And I think that's a really great forum to really bring things together. Will and I often talk that Web3 is the most disorganized space that we've ever been in, coming from pretty corporate environments. And so, I think that, bringing that level of coordination, and just, I think, we're here to help. We're here to talk about things. We're here to make things happen. We are a tool, so to speak, not in you're such a tool, though maybe at points in time that's been true. I don't know.
And I kind of want to build on the critique that I had, which is to say I'm sure a lot of individual people have had a good experience working with, several of there's a couple different entities that kind of deal with Tezos at a high level. But I think when we look at the chain, from collectors and from talking to a lot of collectors on the ETH side and artists who have transitioned from Tezos to ETH, of which there have been many, I think there's a lot of things that Tezos could be doing, either directly through funding or through providing incentives to builders, things that we really need, things like a viable stable coin, to say the least, right? I know there is some stable coin, but it's clearly not being used. None of the platforms are adopting it, but the ability to price tokens in something stable would be incredibly valuable. So you don't have to worry about Tezos going up or down 20% in a day and now having to go and reprice all your tokens, or thinking about that. There's a lot of just really basic user experience things that Tezos could be funding or incentivizing in some way, just to kind of make it feel like there's attention on trying to grow the chain. Because that's really what I'm talking about, is what we lack is economic activity and growth to make us feel like a viable place for people who are already collecting on Ethereum to come over and check out. And so one or two artists having a good experience and getting $1,000 funding for their project is not going to grow that activity here. We need I guess we need confirmation that there's big plans going on. Do you know what I mean? I feel we never hear that. All we ever hear are these deals being signed with brands that then nothing comes of it. And then it's well, could that money have been better spent in another way? That, I think that's the impression.
And you mentioned bringing attention to the chain, and obviously what content creators like you do is an important part of doing that. How can the Tezos ecosystem and the people and entities operating within it support and encourage people like you to continue doing what you're doing?
I mean,
Subscribe to our Patreon. First and foremost. But yeah, go ahead.
No,
Sorry,
I
Trinity.
think that's a great one, because I think that, nobody does this as a full-time job. I'm sure that there are people who do, but we don't. It's especially pushing through bear markets like this, and even if we hope that there's bright lights in sight in the next year or so, it is a lot harder to put out content when things are slow and when there's less excitement and with listenership going down, there's just less overall activity. And I think it's partly making sure that we're kept in the loop around what's the roadmap of efforts, like what are ways to get involved, like what is happening in the future, so that we can maintain that carrot out in the future, looking to chomp down on that. But I think also finding more monetary ways to support content creators, because we're not artists, we're not seeing revenue from the art that we release. I know it's a significant amount of time for you to do this. It's a significant amount of time for us to release the weekly podcast. And so I think it's about making sure that we're seeing, some value from that time, out of the fun and love of doing it.
Okay.
And just reach out. We've never had anyone reach out to us from before. Used to that's even remotely associated with Tezos. It's always been us reaching out. I think personally, we'd love to have someone on the show from the foundation or someone else from Trilotech who knows a lot more about the technology, talk about the recent, the roll up situation and what that might mean. Everyone we talk to who we think knows just says, you got to talk to someone else. I honestly think no one knows what it does. I truly, maybe Stu, and maybe that'll be a different episode, but I have yet to talk to a single person who can explain to me what does this roll up thing mean, why it's a big deal. And it seems like it's a big deal. So I'd love to talk to anyone with expertise on it. So
I wish I had that kind of technical knowledge. I understand conceptually what it does. The tech is not my spot. Moving forward, what's next for the Waiting to Be Signed team? What can people in the space expect to see and hear from you in the weeks ahead?
More great content. Is that the correct answer there?
There are no wrong answers here.
Definitely.
Yeah, we have a couple of new interviews coming out. Last week we recorded one with Luke Shannon, who has created a project around generative chairs, where you actually can get a physical generated chair. We talked about an hour. It was wild. Way more fun than it sounds. But we're also going to be talking to Hash more about the 2.0 release that's coming up in December. So
cool.
Yeah, that's going to be really exciting. I expect a lot of content around 2.0. I mean, they've already got a huge list of artists who have kind of been sitting and waiting for 2.0 to come out. I guess we'll see what, a big part of 2.0, we didn't really talk about this, is that FX Hash is now enabling Ethereum on the platform. So we'll see what portion of these releases are ending up on ETH versus Tez, on-chain versus IPFS. It's going to be very interesting to see how it all shakes out, and we'll be covering it every week
maybe Cyphered can help you understand roll-ups a little bit better and what part they're going to play in the crossover with ETH. I think that would be worth asking.
Yeah. I don't think they'll have any role, but I'm going to ask them.
And where can those who are interested find your content and connect with you?
Yeah, you can follow us on Twitter at Waiting to Sign. The B made off the B. And so you can follow us there, and every time we have an episode, we'll be tweeting about it. You can follow us directly in Spotify or your favorite podcast app. It's Waiting to Be Signed. And if you are enjoying the show, maybe you're already a fan and you're listening, we recently started a Patreon after several artists gave us a really hard time about not having one. So all the content is free. You get nothing for joining the Patreon. You just get the satisfaction of supporting us. And so that's patreon.com/waiting to be signed if you want to check that out.
Sweet. And that satisfaction is an NFT in and of itself, right?
Yes.
Even
And
better.
yeah, and we might have some collabs with artists coming out soon too, which will probably be on FX Hash. So look out for those.
Very cool. We have another audience queue that's come through. Object Collector would like to, it says, I'm also starting a podcast that documents object. Any advice to get started?
Just get started. I think that is the number one thing. And, if you have a friend who wants to do it with you, like Will and I, it keeps you accountable. It keeps you motivated to keep doing it every week. And I think just consistency is key. Write down what you want to talk about, write down the art that interests you, and just go for it. And maybe get a good microphone. That's maybe the other thing.
Yeah, they're like $80. It's no big deal to get a good microphone. And don't sweat the numbers early on. Don't sweat growth. Like, it's something that comes with time. You're not instantly going to have 100 or 500 or 1,000 listeners. It's just, consistency. You got to be doing it for yourself, to be honest. So you got to just be happy with what you're making, feel good about it, and keep your fingers crossed that the listenership will follow.
Fabulous. We could go on for hours, but we're just coming to the end here. And before we close off, I'd like to announce the winner of the 25 Tez we're giving away today. Today's winner is Yogi Juliansa. Congratulations, Yogi Juliansa. To claim your prize, just email us at social@tezoscommons.org. We'll request a screenshot for proof that you're the account owner, and then we'll go your shiny new Tez over to you just as quick as we can. For those who missed out today, we remind you that there are awesome giveaways to be found frequently here on the TezTalks live stream, so keep tuning in. If you'd like to get in touch with us, our social media contacts can be found at tezoscommons.org/TezTalks. We'd love to hear from you. Will and Trinity, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always awesome to speak to the folks dedicating their time and talents to spreading the Tezos message to the world. Is there anything else you'd like to mention or plug before we sign off here?
Thank you, Stu, for bringing us on. We really appreciate it. And, podcast to podcast. Thank you.
My pleasure. Yeah. My pleasure.
If you're ever in the New York area and you want to play Magic, hit us up on Twitter. It'll give us a reason to get a group together and play.
That's fair. Thanks again. To everyone out there in Tezos land, thanks for joining us on the TezTalks live stream. I'm Stu from the Tezos Commons, and our awesome guests have been Trinity and Will from the Waiting to be Signed podcast. Now let's go consume some Tezos content.
Thanks, Stu.